Good morning. And a very warm welcome to everyone to the United Church of Strafford. Welcome to everyone here in the sanctuary, and welcome to everyone joining us this morning on Zoom. And first, a very warm welcome and thank you to Anamika for joining us today, and the choir for beautiful, beautiful music, and to Herb Gertz for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thank you. Are there any announcements to share this morning?
Good morning. As many of you know, Anamika and I are having a concert of John Cage's music on Friday the 20th. One of our pieces is called Miro. It's based on a text by Thoreau from his journals, and we still have room for one or two more readers. If anybody would like to do that, it's not too late. I brought the music with me, so give me a shout or something at the end of the service, and yeah, you're welcome to join in. It's very easy.
It's not really music. I will explain it a little bit. It's just reading, really. So you don't need to sing. And we will rehearse it today after church. The first read through tomorrow evening at 5:45. Another reading, just to kind of practice it and get the feel of it. And it's going to be a lot of fun because I've never played a piece for toy piano before, and it's going to be really interesting. So I hope you can come Friday. Thank you, choir, for singing today. It's really nice.
I also wanted you to know that this week the Mission Committee really struggled with how to best respond and help the conflict, people in this current conflict. And so we decided, as we've decided many times before, to work through World Central Kitchen and send a donation to them probably tomorrow. We just decided yesterday that felt good. I just checked in this morning, and it looks like they are on the ground already feeding people in Israel, in Gaza, and they are prepared to feed people who are fleeing to surrounding countries, refugees who are leaving both places. So they are feeding everyone, and I feel like that is the best way we can, help. If you have other ideas, please don't hesitate to let Cameron, Maggie, or me know. Thank you.
Excellent. So the choir can come up for the intro.
Stand, oh, stand firm.
As we light the peace candle today, let us now put our hearts together in prayer for peace in the world. At this moment, when there is so much darkness of war in so many corners, so many are displaced, and so many are hurting, our brothers and sisters, please join me in unison in the reading. In Christ was life, and the light was the light of the world. Let us pray fervently for peace and the things that make for peace as we light the peace candle. We are going to now sing Dona Nobis Pacem, Give Us Peace. And the choir will lead and sing it through once together, and then we will, you're welcome to join us if you know it. If you don't, you're welcome to look in the Methodist hymnal, the bright red hymnal. It's on page 376. We'll sing it once through, and then we'll sing it in a round in 2 parts. Thank you. And now Herb Gertz will read to us from Corinthians 1, chapter 13. Thank you, Herb.
As Danette already pointed out, we live at a time when violence, dissension, hatred, and war seem to be everywhere. And yet there is one spirit that gives life to all of us, one spirit that lives in all of us, and one spirit that makes us all brothers and sisters. God is love. And so I think this is perhaps expressed as urgently and convincingly as anywhere else in the scripture in the letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians, chapter 13. Though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not love, I am become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, and I have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to the burned, and have not love, it profiteth me nothing. Love suffereth long and is kind. Love envieth not. Love vaunteth not itself, and is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, and is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, and rejoiceth in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Love never faileth. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, and love, these three. But the greatest of these is love.
Thank you, Herb. Let's join together, please, in saying together the Lord's Prayer. The new version can be found in your pew rack. Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer, way, truth, and life, force of love and light, flowing within and all around us. May your realm of compassion, justice, and peace rule our world. Thank you for nurturing and guiding us, forgiving us and helping us forgive, and leading us away from harmful desires. Please save us from all forms of evil, for you are our source, our home, our power, all goodness and beauty forever. Amen. And now Herb Gertz will speak to us on democracy and moral imperative. Thank you very much, Herb.
I'd like to start my remarks with a brief excursion into the realm of philosophy. There is a concept of determinism, and this is a philosophical doctrine that nothing can happen other than what does happen, because every event is a necessary outcome of causes preceding it, and those causes in turn are the necessary outcome of causes preceding them. In other words, to put it more simply, all human acts and decisions are the inevitable consequence of antecedent states of affair. Now, the dispute between this doctrine and its opposite is still very much alive among philosophers today. If you accept this doctrine, then free will doesn't exist. Just as a poisonous snake cannot be faulted for being poisonous, that is its nature, it's inevitable, so human beings could not be faulted for anything they do, because they simply act out their nature. It's predetermined. It's part of determinism. This was rejected outright by the eminent philosopher Immanuel Kant. And omitting some of Kant's more complex reasoning, he demonstrates that it is impossible to assume or to argue that we do not have free will. It is an empirical fact that we have moral concepts. For example, something is good, something is bad, something is just, something is unjust, something is moral, something is immoral, it's right or wrong. And nearly all of us, even if we wish we could ignore them, are unable to disregard them altogether. Now, for these concepts to have any meaning, we must have a choice to do or not to do something. Because if we don't have a choice, if we never have a choice, then words like duty, good, fairness, justice, we ought to do something, have no meaning whatsoever. And in fact, we might as well abolish all our courts of justice, because if people have no choice and simply act out what's predetermined, then nobody is responsible for anything he does. And yet, practical experience shows us that that's not the case. Take a simple case. Suppose somebody walks ahead of you and he drops a wallet full of bills. There's nobody else around, so you have the choice of picking it up and keeping it for yourself, or calling out and saying, "Hello there, you dropped your wallet." That's definitely a choice you have. Well, so there is a free will, but to exercise it sometimes is risky. For example, it was risky to condemn the treatment of Jews in Nazi Germany. Everybody was free to do so, but it involved a considerable risk. I'm going to read a brief section here from my book. Yeah, there's a case here where after the war, when food was extremely scarce and the Americans were living in an old fortress-like castle in a small town of Kempen, where my family had been evacuated to, and they had plenty of food. And they also had cigarettes and coffee, which could be traded for food. So there were certain nighttime visitors who came from the surrounding area. Those were women, and they spent some time with the Americans in exchange for food. Now, the good people of Camp Kempen did not approve of these nighttime visitors to the castle, and their righteous anger was kindled by a fiery sermon preached in the church of St. Katharina, which had the misfortune of opening out onto the park and thus having to witness the nocturnal comings and goings. The priest thundered against the shameful vice and profligate sinfulness perpetuated by these godless women. I found his outspoken moral indignation that Sunday strangely at odds with the discreet silence that had shrouded the mass murder of the Jews throughout my years of regular church attendance. In other words, the priest did the safe thing. He attacked what he considered to be a vice, but he did not say anything about the much greater sin that was committed, namely the treatment of our fellow citizens, the Jews. Now you might say perhaps he didn't know exactly what was happening to the Jews. However, many things were known. Mosques had been burned. Jews were not allowed to sit in public parks because they might sit next to an Aryan and thus contaminate the area. Jews were not allowed to go to a dentist, at least not an Aryan dentist, because the dentist might put his hand into the mouth of a Jew and then into the mouth of a dentist. That would be terrible, and so on. These things were known long before the so-called Endlösung or final solution, which meant to send the Jews to concentration camps. But as you notice here, our priest, he railed against some women who came and had sex with American soldiers in exchange for valuable food and valuable things that were absolutely necessary for survival. These he attacked, but not the more serious underlying problem. Now, the same thing can be said about the war in Ukraine right now, for example. In Russia, everybody has free will. Yes, you are free to do what you want to do. However, the consequences may be extremely severe. If you speak out against the war in Ukraine, you may wind up in a penal colony or worse. And most of us are made of ordinary clay and are not willing to risk a jail sentence, let us say, or other torture or mistreatment. So it's better to stay quiet. You can say the same of any evil or injustice. It's difficult to oppose it if the consequences are so severe. For example, in Iran right now, the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, I don't know whether I pronounce her name right, but Narges Mohammadi, that's the way I pronounce it, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison, suffered torture, and yet she speaks up. The morality police, it seems, as I call it, the morality police in Iran, runs around and checks whether women's headscarves are exactly right. And if the headscarf is ever so slightly off, then in one case, a person was actually beaten to death. In another case, a young woman was beaten into a coma because the morality police thought it was slightly off her headscarf. Well, that can happen when you have a system where speaking up is not tolerated. And so I'd like to read a brief section from my book which shows why it's so important to have democracy. How can we explain that darkness so often eclipses light in the world? At least part of the answer lies in the political institutions and traditions of different countries. Wherever democracy thrives, hatred and violence cannot rule unchallenged. I am not so naive as to believe that democratic nations have not been and will not be again guilty of heinous crimes against humanity. But when people are free, they will sooner or later recognize evil for what it is. Many will take a stand against it so that a measure of reason and decency may prevail in the end. Sometimes the wait may be excruciatingly long, yet even in the blackest night, the torch of hope will not be fully extinguished. Such countries are never without a conscience. Eventually, their citizens will be roused into action, supporting what is right, opposing what is blatantly wrong. Edmund Burke has said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." It is perhaps the greatest virtue of democracy that it is a system which makes it relatively safe for us to fight against evil. One does not have to be a hero to do so in a free country. To be sure, dissent has its cost, but these do not exceed the price that honorable people of strength and character are prepared to pay. They may be ridiculed, they may face some economic hardship, harassment, and even persecution. They do not, however, expect to be tortured, shut up in a concentration camp or gulag, or put to death. In all nations, at all times, there are many people of goodwill. Democracy provides an institutional framework within which their voices can be heard. In a dictatorship, by contrast, it is often not enough to be good. You must be a hero as well, ready to risk everything to prevent the triumph of evil. And heroes are scarce everywhere. They are called upon to show extraordinary courage, while most of us, alas, are made of ordinary clay. I'm thinking here of, for example, in the Nazi period, some people who acted out of their Christian convictions and Christian faith, although it wasn't even necessary to be a Christian, you could have acted just from basic human decency. I'm thinking, for example, of Pastor Bonhoeffer or the brothers Scholl, Sophie and Hans Scholl, who objected to the ideology of Nazism, the ideology of hatred and Aryan supremacy. And they both were, of course, executed and paid with their lives. That takes really extraordinary courage. Not too many people are willing to risk their lives for their convictions. And so we can say that one important lesson is that democracy, for all its imperfections, offers the best and perhaps the only hope that good men will not allow evil to triumph absolutely. Thus it becomes a moral imperative for men and women everywhere to preserve and strengthen democratic institutions. So I think we are not talking just about this or that form of government. We are talking about a way that guarantees that without having to risk your life, people can speak up and uphold standards of human decency and goodness. In the absence of democracy, it always requires heroism, it requires a willingness to give up your life, But with democracy, everybody can speak up without having to fear those dire consequences. So it seems to me that it's more than just one form of government as opposed to another form of government, but it is in fact a moral imperative to have democracy in order to guarantee that we don't slide into, well, a system where evil can run unchecked. And so this is my conclusion then, that democracy becomes a moral imperative, and it is much more than just one form of government as opposed to another. I think I'd leave it at that. It's brief, but I hope fairly convincing. So, thank you. By the way, I might add that's a different chapter though, that unfortunately democracy is on the decline worldwide. And that you can even say the same thing about the United States. That's a topic of another talk, but democracy is in danger when, for example, after an election that you lose and you then immediately start to talk about stop the steal and send out people to storm the Capitol, you can see that democracy is in danger because there was no steal, since judges all over ruled that there was no significant fraud anywhere, and thus the election results were legitimate. But when they're not accepted, and when the people are then sent out to storm the Capitol, we have democracy in serious danger. So we should be on our guard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Herb. Appreciate that. Please join together with me in reading together the 23rd Psalm as printed on the back of your bulletin. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We will now sing together, Let There Be Peace on Earth, which can be found on page 431 in the bright red Methodist hymnal. so much to think about and reflect on and meditate on and pray about. We should probably sit here for a week, but we won't. We'll sit in silence for 5 minutes, please, and reflect as you see fit. Amen. Please join me in the benediction. A benediction is the bestowing of a blessing, especially at the end of a religious service like this one. And if you're able to stand and let us read together this benediction from Philippians as a blessing to each other, to send us on our way today and as a way to send love and light out into the world. Finally, sisters and brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there's any excellence, if there's any worthy of praise, think about these things.